Welcome to Redneck Caviar, the podcast where we talk about Southern culture and anything that entails. You can follow our podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, Google, and Stitcher, as well as subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm your host, Benjamin. I'm joined today by Halle Lee, a California native who moved to southern Missouri when she was just 3. How are you doing, Halle?
Doing just fine.
Well, let's jump straight into it. You are a passionate cook. What inspired you to cook?
Well, I was always interested in cooking. My mom cooked quite a lot. As good as like 90s, early 2000s home cooks can get. But I really enjoyed her food. And since I was very small, I was just always very fascinated with cooking. I demanded an easy bake oven when I was very small. And soon I upgraded to cooking in the actual kitchen.
And was it always Southern, or did you start with anything else?
It was usually a combination of Southern food and then not so surprisingly, Mexican food because we're from Southern California.
Yeah. And so your parents or your mother specifically, was she always also a Southern cook, or did she have a background in any other type of cuisine?
Mostly just the stuff she learned from my grandparents and the Mexican food. The Southern food started coming in after we moved to Missouri, and she picked up the Fannie Flagg cookbook that was written after the Fried Green Tomatoes book.
Yeah, sure. Is there a specific cuisine that they cook in Missouri? Because like in Louisiana, obviously they have Cajun food. In Texas, it's mostly Tex-Mex things. Is there something specific in that area?
Oh yeah, I definitely love Cajun food and Tex-Mex. As for Missouri, Midwestern cooking is kind of a combo of Southern cooking and its own cuisine. A lot of casseroles. I've been to a lot of potlucks with other people cooking kind of their own native food. And surprisingly, there's a lot of Midwestern food that are casseroles with tater tots. We never had that at my home, but I found that pretty interesting.
Yeah, and was that your favorite Southern cooking, or do you prefer something else from the South?
My favorite Southern foods, besides the desserts, I am just a big fan of anything with chicken in it, and probably my favorite Southern food is chicken and dumplings for sure.
Yeah, well, you're in the right place for chicken. So how long have you been cooking?
Oh, definitely. I'd honestly say since I was 5 years old, so that would be about 18 years.
Do you have a specialty?
Definitely baking and dessert making. And then in terms of more dinner foods, anything soups and stews.
Well, any stew in particular, or like any dessert in particular?
Well, my favorite dessert to make is banana pudding, and
Yeah,
that can easily translate into banana cream pie. I'm pretty
of
good at
course.
making pies.
Yeah, cool. Missouri is if you're gonna go somewhere in the South, Missouri is the place. I mean, it's where like a lot of incredibly significant, historically significant events happen. Like the Pony Express starts in Missouri, as does the Oregon Trail and things like that. What was it like growing up there? What was the atmosphere like?
Well, admittedly, I didn't really take in a lot of like what happened in the South until late elementary school. But it is very interesting, the history here. It's funny that you mentioned the Pony Express because 2 friends of mine had actually never heard of it. I only told them about what it was recently. So not everyone keeps in touch with what happened, but a lot of people, at least in the hometown I grew up in, are really big on like Civil War history. In elementary school, we did a whole lesson plan based around the Civil War. and the class was divided into two factions, which were the Union and the
Yeah.
it's so weird talking about, but I believe I was on Robert E. Lee's side in that lesson plan.
Did you have a personal quarrel with that?
Personally, I didn't, but that's because, admittedly, American elementary schools can teach hard lessons pretty lightly. So it wasn't until early high school that I figured out that like Robert E. Lee was kind of considered the bad guy.
Yeah, sure. Well, I don't think you'd want to teach a bunch of elementary kids that kind of thing.
Well,
Although, yeah, it's a controversial topic, definitely, but I think the North definitely did some questionable things. Like the St. Louis massacre, for example, that definitely turned Missouri into more of a Confederate state during the Civil War. But yeah, I mean, the Missouri was definitely a very significant place. Over 1,000 battles for the Civil War happened in that state, so it's definitely very significant. So I see why they teach that thing so thoroughly. Missouri is also home to some pretty intense weather. For example, one of the most destructive tornadoes in U.S. history, the Tri-State tornado in 1925, happened. Have you ever experienced any intense tornadoes or earthquakes in your life there?
Not directly. My hometown, I did grow up with occasional tornado warnings. I was very scared, but my older brother told me one day that tornadoes could not hit our house specifically, and I did believe him. It was a great comfort for me. But some years ago, I don't know the exact year, but there was the very devastating tornado in Joplin, Missouri. I later went to college in Joplin for 2 years. It was a lot of years after the tornado had passed, but anyone from that area remembers it. The high school was destroyed. They had to teach classes somewhere else. It was just a really tough time for Missouri.
Yeah, do you live in that area? Have you lived in that area, should I say?
Lived in the Joplin area.
Yeah.
Yes, I did attend Missouri Southern State University, which is in Joplin. Again, I never really saw a lot of the like damage from the tornado, mostly because the college was completely untouched. It was one of the other regions of the city. But because the college was untouched, that's actually where former President Barack Obama gave his speeches for the Joplin people during their recovery.
And that was before or like after or during you were there?
Well, the tornado happened during my life, but I think I was in high school or maybe even middle school. But yeah, I went to college after the tornado.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, well, Missouri, especially like the central or most parts of Missouri, looking at like any populous map is very barren, a lot of farmland. Did you grow up on a farm or in more of a populated area?
I did grow up in the heart of my small town. It was a very nice small town, so I didn't see a lot of the countryside except on car trips, but a lot of my friends in high school, they did in fact grow up on farms.
Yeah, what kind of farming goes on there? Is it mostly like corn?
I'm not actually sure. I mean, a lot of cows, and we definitely see those on the car rides. As for crops, I'm not sure specifically, but we have in most Missouri high schools the FFA. Do you know the FFA?
Slightly, but I'm not very familiar with it.
It basically just stands for Future Farmers of America. I was never part of it, but so much of the student body took up the FFA, and surprisingly held a lot of weight in the school. But they would go around and there would be these cool days at like elementary school when the FFA members of high school would bring like farm animals to the elementary school for the kids to see.
Yeah. Well, I'd say it's definitely important. Too few young people are going into agriculture these days. So most farmers are usually old white men these days. So
Well,
it's a
there's
good cause.
definitely no shortage of young people going into farming in Missouri, luckily. And I think the FFA has a big part to play in that.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely useful. So yeah, I mean, have you traveled across the US a lot in your life?
I actually have. I've been to California a lot growing up. I've seen New Jersey because my dad's actually from New Jersey. I've been on a lot of class trips to different states, and I even studied abroad in London for 5 months.
Oh, no way. I spent most of my life in London, growing up there.
It's a beautiful city.
Yeah, definitely. It can get loud though. So, do you prefer the city or like the quiet town atmosphere?
Well, growing up in the small town, I wanted nothing like but city. I was very interested in going to cities.
Yeah,
And while I still enjoy them as I'm getting older, I can really just imagine like peacefully settling down in a smaller town because I've lived in cities for the last few years of my adult life, and I honestly miss the stars. You can't see the stars in the sky as well when you're in a
it's a big
city,
thing.
but they're very beautiful in small towns and the countryside.
Yeah, I've been the exact opposite most of my life because I grew up in a lot of big cities. I yearn to live in like a quiet town now because like I said, the stars and everything, it's far nicer. You live in a city now.
Yes, I live in Springfield, Missouri.
Uh, um, that's one of the bigger ones, isn't it? One of
Yeah,
the more
it's in
diverse
the
ones.
top three biggest ones.
What's the capital in Missouri?
That is Jefferson City.
Yeah, well, that's one of the bigger. Well, that's one of the older cities in the entire country, isn't it?
Yes.
Have you ever been to any caves in the area or in the state? Because the caves are very popular.
Only twice, and one of them recently. But I did visit one of the caves near Springfield. I don't remember what it's called, but a friend took me there to see it with his family. And yeah, cave tours are very popular here.
Did you like it, or are you claustrophobic?
While I'm claustrophobic, I can like handle walk-in caves, but
Yeah.
people who like go spelunking for hobby, I could never do that.
Did you take like an elevator down into it, or was it like a walking cave?
No, it was a pretty small cave, just about a day trip. And while we were in there, because again, you could just walk right in, there were some unexplored areas that I believe volunteers could help like explore to expand the cave more. But other than seeing the entrance holes, I didn't really like, it wasn't a super deep cave or anything.
Yeah, I heard a lot of people get like married in caves there as well. So it's a pretty big
Not
deal
for
there.
me, but that seems pretty fun.
Yeah, I'm sure. So I mean, yeah, what other I'd be interested in knowing what other southern states you've been to or lived in that you most like.
What other southern states have I been to?
Yeah, like southern ones in particular.
I've only lived in Missouri, but I was very lucky to go on a senior trip to New Orleans in Louisiana. And I had been to a lot of class trips, and that will remain the best. The cultural richness is just so enjoyable, and you can't walk anywhere in New Orleans without smelling food somewhere.
Yeah, you like Cajun food.
Yeah, I love Cajun food.
Yeah, don't we all? Did you ever? Did you not take any vacations with like family or anything?
Not with family. It was only with classmates.
Yeah, mine was the opposite. I've never been on a class trip, but me and my family would take quite a few road trips through the south, especially.
Oh, that sounds very fun.
Yeah, well, I mean, 6 to 7 people in the car driving through the US, it can get quite cramped.
Yeah, I'm not much of a car person. My family isn't big on flying, so when we would visit California, we would just drive the 24 hours there.
Do you have a lot of siblings?
Only two, luckily.
Well, the South is very big on their sports, baseball and football. Are you a sports fan?
I'm not a sports fan personally, but my grandmother, who is a California native, she did move to Missouri with us, and she got very big into football, particularly the Kansas City Chiefs.
So, yeah, I mean, I've never been a big sports person either, but I've based on my time in America, like even if an American isn't big into sports, it usually plays a pretty big role in their life, regardless of if they are themselves because of their parents or grandparents in your case.
Yeah, you definitely can't go much anywhere without seeing sports stuff somewhere. I believe it was last year or maybe the year before when the Kansas City Chiefs actually went to the Super Bowl. And when they won, literally like all of the Walmarts in my city were selling Chiefs merchandise and Super Bowl merchandise, and I couldn't go on Facebook without seeing people talking about it. It's definitely a really big deal here.
Yeah, well, I mean, it is in most of the South, much more than the other states, I've come to realize. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like religion in the South. I mean, Missouri in particular is like mostly Christian and Protestant. Did you grow up in a religious household?
I did not. I attended church a handful of times when I was a kid, but then my parents just stopped taking us. So I grew up without that.
Yeah, well, I grew up with it, frankly. Well, I mean, the music must have been great there. I mean, a lot of very prominent musical figures, not just figures, I mean, Branson, like the Branson Music Festival for bluegrass. And then people like Chuck Berry and stuff being from Missouri. You must have you must be a fan of Southern music now, or like bluegrass and things like that.
While I do love those musics, I am not as big into music as everyone else. By all means, I love listening to it. I was just someone that kind of never really thought about the people making it. But Branson, which I did go to, is definitely a very fun place to be. And it really put into perspective just how much music is part of the culture here as well.
Did you just visit the city or go to like a festival?
I never really went to festivals because, again, that's like not really my thing. Outdoor activities. I've been to like local music festivals where local musicians played, which was always very fun. But I guess that was just one of the things I didn't pay a lot of attention to.
Yeah, you're more a fan of the food.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I'm the same. Um, yeah, I mean, Missouri is a beautiful state. I don't think I've ever been to Missouri, but from what I've heard and seen through like pictures and films and everything, it's quite a diverse state in terms of land and wildlife and things. What do you think of it?
Yeah, Missouri, I definitely like it a lot. There can be some people to make it less desirable, but just in terms of like nature and diversity, as you said, I do love Southern food, but I love foods from like a lot of other cultures as well. And Springfield provides that lots of different cultures, and the lakes are often very beautiful. And I mean,
But
it's my home. It feels like home to me.
yeah, sure. By unsavory people, you mean like people who tend to lean to the far right?
Definitely. That can be a problem. Being the child of like a California parent and a New Jersey parent, our household definitely had politics that went the opposite direction of the people around me. And I
I
didn't
see.
even realize until I was halfway through high school just how differently my classmates thought of things. And it can be challenging, but I haven't struggled finding like-minded people for my social circle, luckily.
So which side do you lean more towards?
Definitely the left side. My parents lean left, and I lean even lefter than them, honestly.
Yeah, your dad too, because New Jersey is quite a right-wing state.
Yeah, both my parents are pretty left-leaning, but I went even farther than them. It possibly my visit to London may have even contributed to that because I witnessed firsthand how healthcare functions in European countries versus the United States, and it can be a bit of whiplash realizing that.
Yeah, definitely. So I mean, I guess you wouldn't be a big fan of like because of fishing, hunting, and things like that. Well, not as big in Missouri, but in the South are definitely big. But I suppose you're not a big fan of that kind of thing.
I'm definitely not a big fan of hunting myself. A lot of my classmates growing up, they went on hunts like every weekend. Camouflage was part of the fashion.
Yeah,
I can mostly respect it. I know it's not something for me, but it's very important to some people. I just tend to ignore it. I do enjoy fishing, though. It's not something I do often, but when I do, it's pretty enjoyable. It's just peaceful. I like water, and I don't know, you can really get your thoughts together while fishing.
yeah. Well, I've certainly been hunting more than I've been fishing, but with all the lakes and rivers and fresh water there, I assume it would be a big part of most people's lives. What's the biggest fish you've ever caught?
Oh, that's the embarrassing part. Fishing's probably so peaceful for me because I never catch anything.
Well, I've never caught anything big either, to be honest. So no shame.
Yeah, everyone on social media, they have the pictures of them holding their giant fish catches, and you know, I got good pictures of me in front of lakes, but that's about it.
Yeah. So the whole wilderness camping lifestyle isn't for you, then I assume.
I'm definitely not an outdoorsy type. It is something that I do find very intriguing, but the honest truth is that the only thing that's really kept me from camping all these years is that I am very afraid of bugs. It's
Yeah.
definitely an irrational fear, but it makes me avoid a lot of outdoor activities that I otherwise like wouldn't avoid. But that's why in like the fall and winter you'll see me outside a lot more.
Yeah, what kind of bugs? Like mosquitoes, because it's humid there. So I assume there'd be a lot of those.
Mosquitoes are torture, especially in this region. I believe I have a mild allergy to them because when they do bite me, the mosquito bites really swell up.
Yeah.
Um, and then the infamous June bugs, you see them every summer. And even people who don't have a problem with bugs, they also hate June bugs. There's just something about them that's horrifying.
They don't bite or anything, do they?
They don't. They honestly just stick to you and they try to get caught in your hair. And I don't know what it is, but they just strike fear in everyone.
Yeah. Do they have any like? I assume they'd have cougars there and stuff too, in like the mountains and forests.
Yeah, cougars and coyotes. I haven't seen any cougars myself, but I have seen coyotes, and surprisingly, they will wander into the towns at nighttime if it's quiet enough.
Yeah. Well, um, I suppose it would be more in the rural areas, like where all the farm animals are, because I've heard quite a few things about like these coyotes and things like that attacking farm animals. So it's a relatively big problem in rural areas.
Yeah, definitely. a lot of things can pose threat to farm life and farm animals, and wild animals are unfortunately just one of those problems.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, it's only been an issue. So, I mean, frankly, what else can you tell me about living there? I mean, music, food. I mean, what's had the biggest impact on you living in
Out
the
of
US?
everything, Southern culture wise, that has had an impact on me, that is the food, as I've mentioned, and the sense of community. That is something that everyone talks about when it comes to the United States in general, but especially the South. You know, given that you are considered a socially acceptable person, people here can be very nice and friendly and polite to complete strangers. I know that in the UK, it's not as customary to just strike up conversations with people on public transit,
Yeah, definitely
among
not.
others.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned Fanny Flagg and her book, Fried Green Tomatoes, The Whistle Stop Cafe. Are you a big fan of reading? Because there's a lot of very prominent writers from Missouri, like
I am
Mark Twain and things like that.
I am a very big fan of reading. It's always been a hobby of mine, probably reading and cooking. I even listen to audiobooks so I can get my reading in while I cook. And in terms of Southern food and Southern culture, you're right. Fanny Flagg's cookbook was one of the biggest inspirations for me. My mom always cooked recipes from it. And when I graduated high school, she bought me my own copy. And I didn't actually read the book until in the last 4 years. My mom has the follow up cookbook that came after the book, but she only ever watched the movie. I did buy her a copy of the book, but she never read it. Only I read the original source material.
Yeah. How many recipes have you made from it?
Oh man, it would be really hard to count. Between 20 to 30, honestly, maybe even more. It's been a feature all my life, you know. It's a surprise to find out another thing I like came from that book.
Yeah, which is what? Yeah, I mean, that's like the Adventures of Huckleberry Finn are also based in Missouri. So yeah, you're in a good place if you like reading.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, I mean, I'd say that's about time. I mean, it's been like 30 minutes now. So I mean, I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun and we talked about some cool stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Is there anything else you'd like to add? I mean, this podcast is mainly for a UK audience. What would you say to someone, a European who's visiting the South? What would you advise?
Did you say advice?
Yeah, what would you tell them to go?
Honestly, if you're ever visiting the South, put aside a lot of time just for downtime. While there's culturally a lot of stuff to do, nothing really beats just finding some good nature or farmland and just sitting down and taking it all in. You know, watch the stars.
Yeah, I agree. All right, cool. Well, it was a pleasure having you on, Haley. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, I hope the same for you.
Thanks a lot.